everyone, I'm your host Neha and you're tuned into Durian Dreaming, the show that brings you extraordinary stories from seemingly ordinary experiences in Indonesia's fast-paced market. Let's dive into today's conversation with another inspiring guest. Hi Vido, welcome to our podcast Durian Dreaming. We are very excited to have you with us.
Hi, Neha. Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here as well.
Likewise, Vido. You have had a very exciting career. You've seen three sides of a table. You've seen the publishing side, you have seen as a client, and now you're with the agency.
Yes.
So, having worked across these three different worlds, what's the biggest mindset difference you have seen?
Sure. It is a very interesting perspective, right? Having been in different sides of the table. I think the biggest aha moment for me moving into the agency world is how much we're seeing being here, right? Because we're almost like we're in the center of the client business. At the same time, we're also looking at how the platform are evolving, market dynamics, right? And I think it's almost like having a helicopter view of the entire industry. We get to see first what's actually working or not working for the different companies that are playing out there. The other thing that's also very exciting for us is that we get to be in the seat where we spot trends coming up, right? How unexpected connection and opportunities are emerging from the market. And in the past, I think a lot of this could be driven by big companies. These days, there's a lot of small companies that are experimenting, that are doing new things with the platform. And our job is really to be able to translate the success story into a success story for our clients. So that's probably the biggest mindset or aha moment for me being in the agency side.
Vido, thank you for taking us through that what mindset difference you had to undergo having seen the three different worlds. From WPP Media is a giant and it manages over a third of global media spend. But jumping in from the client side must be a shock to the system. So, after Danone and Facebook, what was the most surprising thing you discovered once you joined WPP Media?
I thought when I was on the client side and also in Meta, I thought things are moving really fast. Actually, now in being in the agency side, that is multiplied a lot more. So that's probably the biggest realization. And I think the other thing is that we are almost in the center of gravity of all these changes, right? And therefore, it is almost imperative for us, if we want to stay relevant, to be able to be ahead of the curve. Like, as I mentioned earlier, right? We are in the center and we're seeing things changing. It means that we need to also have the ability to become expert on these different subjects very quickly. So the willingness to learn, the willingness to let go of my experience in the past and to embrace things that are new and different, and sometimes to be able to also make mistake and learn from it becomes extremely critical. I mean, to a magnitude that is so much more in speed and in the ability to change versus my previous role, I think.
Right. But having worked at the client side, like with Danone, and when you moved into this new role, what are the things that you brought in with you to perform at this role or to lead an agency network?
Oh, many things. I think
Okay.
first, in the past, being in the agency, there's probably a little bit of a position where you feel like the client knows everything. Having been in the client side, actually, the expectation is for an agency to actually be an equal partner, if not more of an expert in areas that we as a client are probably not as well versed about, right? I talk about having a helicopter view, seeing trends and things like that. That is definitely the expectation being in a client side, to be able to have an agency that can sit with you and talk about not just your business problem, some of your challenges, what your competitors are doing, but also how your business can actually find a different way of integrating the latest trend, the platform, the development that's happening in the market to really fuel their business growth.
You talked about the latest trends. And if I talk about the latest trend or the media landscape, people keep saying that TV is dead. But yet in Indonesia, TV still reaches millions of people every night. How do you see TV's role in today's media mix?
Yeah, that's a very oversimplification of the role of TV. And I really like what you said about role, because it does have a very specific role, and it plays a very important role in how brands are able to reach their audience. So first is, if you look at the facts, the number of people watching TV actually has been quite constant, and TV is still the highest source of awareness for our consumer in this market. The other thing is also TV has a very different experience versus digital. When you are watching TV, people are a lot more laid back, right? They're not leaning in like when you're looking at your phone. People are much more relaxed. Their mindset is much more open to experience or to watch or to digest the content that you're serving. And because of that, you'll see as well that people are a lot more engaged, and they're able to actually process the messages that your brands are conveying through TV. This is why when it comes to awareness and brand building, TV plays a very, very important role. Other things that's also important to consider in TV is that it's the shared experience. You get to sit down with either your friends or your families, their conversation that can be generated there. Of course, you cannot just look at the medium solely as a single medium, but you also then have to start integrating your activity across digital, because people are now multi-screening as they watch TV, right? And last but not least, which is an important point, is that there are many innovations that are now coming that enables the time spent on TV to become more and more. So OTT, streaming content, people are watching YouTube on TV, right? So it's no longer the traditional definition of TV. But to come back to your point, it is very critical to understand the role it plays for advertisers to then know when they should use TV.
Okay, so we have TV at one end, and we have TikTok on another end, which is both a media giant and a commerce platform. So, how should brands in Indonesia be approaching TikTok today?
Okay, so again, different roles. I think what's interesting about TikTok is it's probably one of the big phenomenon where the platform is able to offer the full funnel experience from awareness to conversion in one, right? Talk is about the integration of entertainment, community, and commerce. But advertisers also need to understand how to play in this platform. TikTok is more about being very authentic, right? When you create a TV ad, it's much more polished, it's the brand talking. If an advertiser wants to play in a platform like TikTok, they first need to play it in a way that is within the framework of the platform, which is it needs to be real, it needs to be authentic, because that is what creates this trend or virality or the ability to then reach the audience at scale. The second thing that's also very important for brand to consider in using TikTok is finding a creator that fits with their brand personality, making sure that their brand guidelines are being adhered, right? Because those are some of the things that most brands have to really consider when they use the creator or the people that are generating this content in the platform. TikTok also offers a lot of features and functionalities that can help your brands to get discovered better, like boosting your ads, commerce, live streaming. So you also need to be as advertisers, you need to be very well versed in understanding the dynamic. Two last point, but not least, they are also critically as important. It's no longer in the same way as planning an advertising campaign in the past. with TikTok, things are moving really fast. So you need to have the ability to spot where the trend is coming up and be able to be very agile and very fast to create content at scale in a way that is relevant to that trend. I mean, some of these trends are not there for a month or 2 months. They're literally there within weeks, and then something else would come up. So having the ability to be able to create a relevant content at speed and scaling it is going to be incredibly important. And I think the last one is about how do you then build community around this so that you're not just one of the player in the sea of all these noises that's there in the platform.
Right. You talked about content creation. So when an ad is created, there are two sides of it. One is the performance of the ad. The other is the brand building through that ad. So performance marketing versus brand marketing. And there has been a constant and endless debate over it. So
Yes.
where do you stand? And do you think the pendulum has swung too far in one direction?
I think this is a very interesting debate, right? And this debate is not something that we're just having right now, but it's all the expert in the market is really at the moment talking about this. I'm a marketing at heart, and I believe that the funnel, or some companies are using the flywheels, is important across. You will not be able to create a conversion or performance marketing if you don't build brand. So you need to start by building brand, creating awareness, targeting enough audience for you to then be able to bring them down, for them to consider your product, and then try your product, and then buy, and then become loyal to the product, right? So you need to fill the funnel from top to bottom. It is not a choice to say, oh, I'm just going to go from below. And what's interesting is, so I guess to come back, it's equally important. And the more you build the top funnel or the awareness, the more you have the propensity to create stronger performance or ROI on the bottom. Now, what happened is lately, because a lot of the awareness measure are not as directly linked to your sales, when the business situation is difficult and there is a short-term pressure to perform, a lot of companies are then shifting more into the lower funnel. But I find this very, very short term, because you will not have enough fuel to build that performance if you don't continuously build that awareness in the top funnel. So it is a very pertinent question, especially in the era where, I mean, the economy is very difficult. Now the geopolitics is adding fuel to this whole thing, where company needs to continue to think that they need to think long-term as they also secure the short-term performance.
Right. And then there is, so this performance marketing, there's brand building, there are different media touch points. The advertising world is also buzzing with AI. So from your creative generation to media optimization, how is it reshaping the way agencies and clients work?
I have to say, it's fundamentally the single most important thing in the way that we work, right? Because as I said, especially a market like Indonesia, where the fragmentation of channel and media is multiplied by the fragmentation of the consumer of the country. But what is really critical is, because I also feel that sometimes AI is a word that we throw around very easily without really understanding how we can change the way we operate and we work, right? I see it as a powerful tool. Like you said, it can create content and multiply it in a way that is not possible before. It processes massive information, complex data instantly. It also gives you the ability to have a very narrow or sharp insight, and therefore be able to make a precise decision. But at the end of the day, the the part that is incredibly critical in making AI output relevant is the thinking behind, right? How do you prompt the creative idea? And those things it has to be done by the human part. So the AI is just the tools, and the talent that we have will have to also adapt and transform their ability to do things themselves by now having to think much more strategically in terms of like giving input, in terms of thinking about coming up with new innovation, and to be able to drive a superior outcome from these tools. But it is going to be a single most important determinant, I think, in the success of both the agency and also the clients.
Right. Another thing that has happened with the massive explosion of AI and its tools is that clients are building in-house media teams. So while consulting firms are expanding into marketing services, putting pressure on the classic agency model. So the two things, these consulting firms which are expanding into marketing services, and then client themselves are also building in-house media teams. So the traditional agency model is under fire. What do you think the future of the agency looks like?
It's a question that I think all of us being in the agency side continuously thinking about and evolving our thinking around this. We need to transform for sure, right? We cannot be anymore a supplier to our client or a vendor. We need to be an indispensable partner to them, where we also have to have the ability to architect solution for them. So our job, we have to elevate our output from just, okay, this is the plan that you asked for, into, hey, I see this business opportunity for you through this, and let's explore this together, right? And it's almost, to your point, it's almost like moving into a consulting role where you think much more strategically, but you also use your expertise of data, creativity, and technology to be able to create a superior solution. So coming back to your point about client in-housing their media, it makes sense because I guess for them, it's a way of protecting their cash flow. They can manage that better. But our role here is, because we have this expertise, is to maybe offer them a solution around how can they be more efficient in doing that media planning, in executing the buying, because that is an expertise that we have. How do they enable technology and data and to connect all the investment that they have so that they can have a much more efficient outcome, for example. So as I see that becomes a competition, I think it is also important that we think about how we can evolve our role using the expertise that we have in data, tech, consumer insight, creativity, because those are not something that is available on the client side, for example, or on the consulting side, for us to then be able to offer a better outcome for our client.
And WPP Media itself has undergone a lot of global restructuring and leadership transition. So, in the Indonesia context, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities for WPP Media?
So, we had our transition last year. To be really honest, I think it was the right thing to do because it enabled us to actually leverage on our global expertise. We have now one platform that we use across all the agency brands that we have. And because of that, then we're also able to leverage some of the expertise that we have within the organization. So it creates a much more seamless access for our client to tap into the best technology, the best of our people. Now, as I mentioned to you, Indonesia is a very dynamic market with a lot of complexity, right? We have to navigate this hyper fragmentation of culture, digital, and geography in a market where there is a very diverse sort of like baseline of understanding on the different roles of what we can bring our client, right? So because our client are not all the same, right? Some of them are a lot more advanced in their thinking in terms of data usage. Some of them are much less behind, right? Some of them wants to experiment on the latest things that's in the market. So being able to offer a solution that is tailored to also the maturity of the client around the different investment or channels that we have available is going to be something that is critical for us. The other thing is also this speed of change is creating the need for us to have people that are very open to learning new things, agile, being able to mix things like data and technology with creativity. And those talent are very, very rare. If we talk about the emergence of, for example, social commerce in Indonesia, which is one of the largest market in the region, the talent are very, very limited. It's very difficult. The competition is very fierce for these people. So those are some of the challenges that we have, but at the same time, those are also the opportunity, right? Because the social commerce trend is growing. And again, a lot of our clients are curious and wants to be part of that. We have quite an expertise in this space, and we're driving sort of like new cases in terms of how we should do it. We're learning around it. So those are some of the exciting part, and not to mention how we can leverage our AI platform and data capabilities to help our client to create stronger efficiency and better outcome on their investment.
So then what is the current state of advertising industry in Indonesia?
So if you look at the market, the AdX market, actually the market this year is expected to grow slightly, right? Okay. But there is definitely a shift that is happening towards digital. Coming back to your earlier point, when things are difficult, then the temptation is to go to more the performance side of the business. And as I mentioned, it is not something that is sustainable, because interestingly, if you look at the players that are winning in this market at the moment, a lot of them are big FMCG that are spending a lot on TV, continuously creating awareness on the top funnel. There are also the extreme of smaller players that are growing in terms of share and their business coming from digital. So these are the TikTok brands, like the likes of Skintific or, the indie brands. So the market is actually still very, very dynamic, but the approaches are also, as I said, very fragmented, and it comes from different sides. So it is very important, I guess, for advertisers to really have a very sharp objective about what is it, where is their growth going to come from? And then it's our job to then find what is the best orchestration of channel and mix that is going to help them deliver the best outcome, or the best ROI to the dollar they spend.
So looking ahead, and Gen Z now is a huge part of Indonesia's population, and the way they consume media is very different from millennials. So when you look at the future, which trend excites you the most, and which gets you worried or a bit concerned?
It's interesting. So Gen Z is definitely a very specific audience that has a very specific behavior. But if you look at them in totality, they are still also consuming some of the traditional media, like TV, for example. So again, I think it's more about creating a content that is relevant for them versus just focusing on what channel that seems to be more sticky to them, for example. Because the reality is, if you are able to create content that is relevant, then it can it can create the right engagement or interaction with the target audience. Now, talking about trends, maybe the one that excites me the most is also the one where not so much that I worry, but I think there's really more opportunity for us to prepare for, would be on social commerce. We see the acceleration in the way that this platform is moving, right? The Indonesian doesn't have any problem buying something from TikTok shop or during live stream. If anything, there is almost this, almost like an addiction to people selling something online and talking to you, right? People are buying stuff that they probably don't need. I mean, in the past, it's probably like this TV shopping channel where when you can't sleep, then you watch them all the time. And these days, like if you're bored or you have some extra time, like literally it's just one button push. And I don't think we're prepared. I spoke to you about this in terms of like talent, people who really have the expertise of understanding where this trend is going. How do we capitalize it in a way that is safe for brand and can scalable? Because we're here in a way we're dealing with individuals, right? And unlike the past where it's either a publisher or a platform, media company. So, but again, I don't think that we can shy away from this. This is going to be one of probably the biggest trend that is coming for us, if it's already not. And therefore, if I have a bit of a concern, it's more about how do we prepare for it, right? How can we be an advocate that can also execute this in a way that is going to be beneficial for our clients?
Right. Agency-client relationship hasn't changed that much. And both sides still may be getting frustrated. I mean, at different times. So if you could rewrite the rule book, what's the first rule you'd scrap and what new one would you add?
So, okay, I come from a client to the agency, right? So in a way, what I find, I didn't have this mindset that I'm secondary to the client. And I feel like sometimes, right? So I can't really speak because I've never been to the agency, to the client, then coming back to the agency, right? I only have been in a client and then I come into the agency. So for me, I think this mindset of, oh, but the client wants it this way is something that I feel would be something that I would scrap, right? Because our role is about being able to sit in the table and talk to our client and said, well, but there is a better way because this is what we're seeing. Or have you considered this because this is also what we're seeing? This is what success look like for this business and that business, for this platform, for this brand, for example. And the other thing that I also find very interesting is I come to a client site not as a, not feeling that I'm there to maybe surfing is not the right word, but I'm there equally as their partner, right? And that is probably what I find sometimes missing a little bit. The other thing, and this just came to mind, is slightly different. Maybe this is not so much of a client experience, but when I was in platform, there is a mentality of selling. And for me, selling is not so much about, selling because we know that this is the right thing for the client, but it's also almost like marketing. You need to have the ability to surface insight in a way that is compelling to the client. So it's having almost like a storytelling skill, right? To show why is this data critical or why is this solution important to you. And if you're able to package that in a way, almost like trying to sell water when I was in Aqua or skincare when I was with Unilever, you need to make the solution that you're trying to sell to the client in a way that is fitting with what they're looking for. And I think that storytelling ability is probably something that we don't cultivate enough as an agency. And I think that's definitely a big competitive advantage, I feel.
You spoke truly someone who's adapted very well to the agency role. So, now you tell me, what do you think agencies misunderstand about their clients?
I think sometimes we misunderstood that they want us to just do what they tell us to do. Because that was sometimes the frustration I had with on the client side. Like, oh, but I want you to challenge me. I want you to come to me and tell me what I'm not doing right. Right? Instead of just, okay, it's, if the client wants A and we give them A and okay, they should be happy. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, but I want A plus or, a more flash out or a more developed or even a challenge or a pushback. I think that is sometimes our client doesn't appreciate us coming back to them with a pushback or with a challenge is something that, or even sometimes a clarification on a brief. If we get a brief that it's not clear enough and we're like, hey, we need to clarify because you probably have 2 or 3 objectives here. Which one is the most important and which one do you want to address? And sometimes they're competing in nature. And it's like, where do you want us to focus? I think that perception that our client just wants us to do what they think is the right thing is probably something that we need to change.
Right. Vido, you have been at the helm of success with some of the big giants, both at FMCG and media world. And if I talk about women and leadership positions and balance, the question is whether women can have it all. So, a career, a family, personal fulfillment. What's your take, especially given your own journey?
Yeah. I mean, I was also a single mother for 19 years. So throughout my career, I was also a single mother. So I guess the answer to that is yes, but not at the same time. Right. And I think in my own journey, being very clear about my priority is very, very important. Looking for a place that understands my priority or environment or work that understands my priority is equally important because it gives you the opportunity to really thrive authentically as you are. So maybe that's the answer to it. I mean, I've been very, very lucky to work in companies that understand and very supportive of developing women into a leadership position. So I get coaching, I get mentoring, I get all the support that I need. But at the same time, I also feel that it was also because I was seeking for those companies, right? Equally, if I were to apply to a company that doesn't appreciate the fact that I'm a mother and I have 2 kids and I was also a single parent, I would probably decide not to join that company. So I think there is a little bit of luck there, but there's also a lot about having that clarity and then deciding which environment is the right environment for me to thrive.
Vido, one last question. So many of our listeners are around 25 to 40 years and trying to grow in marketing or media. So if you could give one piece of advice to a 30-year-old marketer listening today, what would it be?
So I thought about this, right? And it would be actually very different to if I were to give this to my younger self 30 years ago, for example. I find that people these days are not lacking confidence. If anything, a lot of these younger generation are very, very confident about what they know and what they can bring into the table. For me, the problem is because of the exposure of so much information, a lot of the times what you know is very, very superficial. So my advice is to actually say, don't ever think that you know everything, because you can't, right?
Yeah.
It is not possible. So you need to have this ability to be willing to learn new things, to be curious, to not think that you know everything, because this is also my biggest learning. I mean, I've been working for over 25 years. If I pretend that I know everything about media, I don't think I will survive. I know nothing. Every day there's something new. There's someone else younger than me, the same age as my daughter, that will tell me that, oh, there's this trend and this is how you do it. And if I don't have that mindset, I don't think I will be able to survive.
All right. Great advice to our young listeners. Thank you for sharing, and thanks for a very insightful and very engaging conversation and a very true conversation. And no one could have given us an overview about the agency world, given that you have seen both sides of the table. So thanks for being a part of this podcast, Widow.
No, it's a pleasure on my side as well.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Durian Dreaming. I hope today's discussion sparked some new ideas for you. Don't forget to subscribe, share your thoughts, and stay tuned for more exciting stories. Until next time, keep dreaming big.